This is my Toyota Sera, and I tried to fit these two engines into the car and it did not go to plan.
And that's because previously we set out on a mission to build the performance version of the Toyota Sera that never existed. And whilst trying to get the car driving after installing a new high performance engine, we discovered a catastrophic issue.
Oh dear. That could be very bad.
And after removing the whole engine from the car to investigate this issue, we found a huge hole in the bottom half of the engine, meaning that it was completely toast.
I actually don't know what to do.
But I was determined not to be defeated, so I bought this, a second engine to fit into the Sera, but little did I know, my luck was about to get even worse. When trying to swap over the parts from the first engine to our new one, this massive crack appeared, which meant we had two dead engines.
But hopefully my bad luck has run out, because I think I have come up with a solution. So whilst both of these engines by themselves are dead, we can actually combine these two engines together to make one good engine.
And I'm hoping that by doing this, by the end of the video, we will actually get this car running and even driving.
Right, so here is our plan of action. Now, these engines are made up of two main parts, the top half and the bottom half, otherwise known as the head and the block. And the problem with the first engine was that it had a massive hole in the block, whereas the second engine had a big crack in the head. So technically, we could take the head from our first engine and the block from our second engine and combine these together to make one good engine. How hard could that be?
Well, I was about to find out, because this is the first time that I've ever attempted anything like this, because as many of you know, I am not a mechanic. So I was really just hoping that I could pull this off without breaking anything and without anything going wrong.
3, 2, 1. That is one inlet manifold.
Now, in order to execute this plan of splitting both of these engines in half and then doing a little switcheroo, we have to access the head bolts, and to access those, we need to take off the rocker cover.
Here are our camshafts. We have our exhaust cam here and our inlet cam here. We can now go ahead and remove these, because it will give us access to undo all of the head bolts, which will allow us to remove the head.
Now, working on the insides of an engine like this can be quite intimidating. You do have to be a bit more methodical and careful, but if you can follow a set of instructions, then it is quite doable, even for someone like me with no qualifications. So once I had taken off all of the camshaft caps, both camshafts could then be removed.
Nice one. Okay, so now the cams are out. You can see we have a head bolt here, a head bolt here, there, and there. We now need to undo all of those, and then the head can be lifted off. Okay, that's one.
Now, undoing head bolts is actually a pretty physically demanding job, because these bolts are pretty much the tightest bolts on the whole car. But using the breaker bar gave me a little bit more leverage, and I did manage to get them all undone.
Jeez, these are tight, man.
Even with the breaker bar.
Even with the breaker bar. There we go.
Taking off the head then revealed the block of the first engine. Now, of course, we aren't going to be using this because this is the block that has all the damage. However, we will be using the head. But before doing anything else, I had to take this head to the machine shop where it needed to be skimmed and also vacuum tested. So we started off with the vacuum test. Now, for an engine to be running well, the valves that let the air in and the exhaust gases out need to be able to create a vacuum-tight seal when they are closed. And that's what we are testing for here, to make sure that the valves are doing that. Now, we want this gauge to read around about 20, so let's see how our valves are sealing. After checking the first port, it was okay, around 20. The second port, again, around 20, that's good. The third port was all okay as well, but the fourth port, as you can see, was reading about 15, which isn't as good. To fix this, we did something called relapping a valve, which is basically where you smooth the surface between the valve and the valve seat, which hopefully prevents any future leaks. Once that was done, Matt could get the valve refitted, and then it was on to the head skimming. This process uses this big machine, and this will make sure that the mating surface of the head is perfectly flat, so that when we put the two halves of the engine together, we don't have any head gasket problems. And as you can see, after the skimming was done, it leaves this nice, shiny, flat mating surface. The final thing to do is to get the head in this big steam oven, and after 15 minutes, it can be taken out and it looks as good as new.
So here we have our new head after it's been skimmed. That underside is looking very nice indeed. And also we now have the peace of mind that our valves are properly sealing. And now all we need to do is put that head on this block. But as you can see, we still have the old head on this block. So we need to remove this, but you've already seen me do that. So we'll get it done in 3, 2, 1.
But my luck, if you would believe it, was about to take a further nosedive because what we found in the block of the new engine definitely wasn't good news.
Oh dear. Yeah, that's pretty obvious. Oh my God. Okay, so for all of you at home who's wondering what's happening here, there is loads of water in one of the cylinders. Look, have a look. It's like a pond. You probably find some fishes swimming around in that. Okay, but jokes aside, that is really bad.
And that is because water in a cylinder like this can cause rust, which can cause pitting on the cylinder walls. And this can result in a permanently damaged cylinder, which can't retain as much compression, resulting in power and fuel inefficiencies, increases in oil consumption, and even misfires. So this really wasn't the best sign.
This engine has been through a tough life. A really tough life. Maybe you could, because what I'm scared of, because we've literally just found a pond in this cylinder, I'm scared that this is going to be like hydrolocked, this piston.
Hydrolocking occurs when water enters a cylinder whilst the engine is running. Since water isn't compressible like air, if it enters the cylinder whilst the engine is running, it can cause massive damage to the internals of that engine. We just have to hope that this water entered the cylinder after the engine was removed from its donor car, but if it's been in there since the car last ran, this could be catastrophic. Again.
What we can do, we can test this though. We can get a breaker bar on the crankshaft pulley. We can try and turn the engine over, and if the engine turns over, we're fine. But if it's like locked, then not very good.
So that's exactly what I tried to do next. I firstly sprayed some WD-40 in all 4 of the cylinders just to help sort of lubricate them, and then I got my breaker bar on the crankshaft pulley and gave it a try.
Oh. Okay. Yes is the answer. It does. So it does turn over, which is a very good sign. We are not hydrolocked. Now, the only thing that we should check for now is sort of pitting in the cylinder walls. If there's like rust pitting in the cylinder walls, that can be very bad. But there's a little bit of like grit in there, a little bit like gritty material from all the rust, but we can clean that out. I think that's okay. As long as we have compression, which we can check when we put the head on, I think we will be fine. So we can now go ahead and get this engine built.
So was I sure that our water had caused our engine absolutely no damage? No, I wasn't, but I suppose we are just going to have to wait until later on in the video when I turn the key over for the first time to see if this engine runs or not. But for now, we have a long list of jobs that we have to get on with if we want to get this car running and driving in this video. And the first thing on that list is getting the head of the engine fitted onto the block.
Head on.
Now, when installing a head, there's a few things to remember. You have to use new head bolts, and you also have to tighten up these head bolts in the correct torque sequence.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Once the head has been torqued down correctly, we can then get the camshafts fitted. And just like with torquing down the head, the cams need to be tightened down in a specific order with a specific torque setting.
So that's the camshafts in, and that is most of the hard work done now, but there is still a lot of stuff that we've got to add on to this engine, as you can probably tell. But if you want to add some cool features to your car, you don't have to go to all this effort. There is a much easier alternative, and that is through using Carly's OBD adapter. Now, the test guinea pig is going to be this Polo behind me. It does have an entire ecosystem living on it, but Carly will still be able to add some cool features, so let's give it a go.
So step 1 is to plug the OBD adapter into the OBD port.
Step 2 is to open up the Carly app, and then I need to search for the make, model, and year of this car. So this is a Polo. Once that's done, all we need to do is press connect, and then Carly will do the rest. Now, before we start, we can actually go into the diagnostic section and see what's wrong with this car. And there are 8 problems. Some of the air conditioning, the engine, the central electronics, and the ABS brakes. But if I go into the air conditioning problems, I can see that the refrigerant pressure falls below the lower limit. And if I turn the AC on, I can confirm it's warm.
So with this information, I know I can take this Polo to the garage, and all they have to do is fill up the AC gas, and then it will work again. But Carly can do so much more than just diagnosing your car's issues.
We can code in some new features, but we can actually code out some annoying features, such as this seatbelt chime.
To do this, all we need to do is go into the coding section, and out of the many coding options, we should select the seatbelt warning option. And once we've turned it off, we can press code now, and Carly will code that seatbelt chime out of the car.
And now that we've coded that out, as you can hear, there is no more annoying seatbelt chime, which I think is a pretty nice improvement. So to get your hands on a Carly OBD scanner, click the link in the description of this video and use the code on the screen right now, and you'll get some money off. But with all of that said, let's go back inside and continue with the engine.
And that's how you do it.
So now the head is on and the cams are in, it is time to replace this old timing belt. Now, like a lot of things I'm trying in this video, this is completely new to me. I have never timed up a belt-driven engine in my life, so I'm just really hoping that I can get it right. Now, with timing up an engine, the key is to get the bottom half and the top half both in their top dead center position. This is basically the position where cylinder 1 is at the top of its range of motion, hence the term top dead center. Once that's done, the timing marks should line up perfectly, and then the belt can be put on. And after getting this new belt on, our tensioner could then be set. The final thing to do was to turn the engine over twice to check that our timing marks lined up, and that would confirm that we'd done it correctly.
We're good, we're timed up. I actually got... Ladies and gentlemen, that is the first time I've ever done a timing belt, and I think, fingers crossed, we've done it correctly. I'm very pleased.
But this happy moment was soon overshadowed. It seems the universe hasn't finished dealing me even more bad luck, because as I was reinstalling the engine mount, I discovered yet another project-ending problem.
Oh, mate.
At this point, all I could do was just sit in silence in pure disbelief.
I feel like we've come so far. We can't lose to this. We can't lose to this. I don't know.
We've not had one, nor two, but we have had 3 catastrophic issues with engines I've bought for the Sera build. It genuinely has to be a lifetime of bad luck all at once. Let me show you what's happened. So these 3 engine mount bolt holes are supposed to hold up the driver's side engine mount. And as you can see, 2 out of 3 of the bolt holes have huge cracks running down the middle. And I actually noticed this when I was trying to install the engine mount back on. I just couldn't tighten up those 2 bolts. It wasn't working. And this leaves us at a point where we can no longer use this block, because holding an engine mount with 1 out of the 3 bolts it needs is nowhere near strong enough. So what are our solutions? Option 1 is we try and fix it with welding. Option 2 is we try and find another engine. Option 3 is we fit all of the turbo parts onto the original Sera engine. So which one do we choose? So option 1, welding it up, would be the least amount of work. But with this, we'd need to find a specialist welder to come and fix it for us. And the people that I've already spoken to about trying to sort this aren't 100% sure that this is fixable, so it may end up being a massive waste of time. As for option 2, finding another engine, that is a lot easier said than done because these engines are very rare. But even if we did find one, it would take us a long time to receive it, and then on top of that, we have no guarantee that that engine wouldn't just be another disaster. That then leaves us with the third and final option. We turbocharge the Sera's original engine. But not only do we know that this engine runs and drives, but it might actually be a better alternative altogether. Let me explain. So as many of you know, the 4E FTE engine that we were about to put in the Sera is a 1.3 litre, but the original 5E FHE engine is a 1.5 litre. That actually means that if we use the original engine, it has a higher potential for power, but there are some things that we've got to sort out first. Firstly, the head of the 5E is a lot worse for performance than the head of the 4E. This is due to many factors, such as it not having as stiff valve springs. That all means that if we wanted to use the 5E's block, we'd have to use the 4E's head. And on top of that, we're going to have to fit a thicker head gasket in between the block and the head to make sure that we can lower the compression in the cylinders. So if we do these two things and fit the 4E head and the thicker head gasket, there's a possibility we could have an engine that is far superior and more powerful than the one we were originally going to use. So with all of that said, we are not letting this defeat us. We are going with option 3.
So because we were about to perform a surgery on this original Sera engine, we firstly had to get it on the engine stand. Next, we really frustratingly had to undo all of the hard work that we had just done on our 4E FTE because we had to remove the head. After taking out the cams, I could then remove the head bolts. And soon after, I could lift off the head itself. Once that was done, I could then go and do that exact same thing on the 5E. Now, many of you might be wondering why I didn't think to use the 5E's block all along if it is that much better to use. Well, for starters, to run this Frankenstein setup with the 4E head and the 5E block, we're going to have to use a standalone ECU, which is a lot more expensive. There are other reasons, such as wanting to get the car driving as soon as possible, alongside concerns about the reliability issues related to cylinder compression. However, our hand has been forced with this one, and I might have to spend a bit more money and put in a bit more work, but the end product will be a Toyota Sera which has a much torquier, powerful and fun engine. So now the 5E head has been removed, I can now move on to the next job, which is to remove the oil sump or the oil pan, and this is for a very important reason.
And that reason is this sump, which came off the 5E FHE engine. As you can see, it is a sump with no holes in it, which is usually good, but we need a sump with a hole in it. And the reason why we need a hole in our sump is because obviously we are running a turbocharged setup on this engine now, and of course it was naturally aspirated before, so it had no turbo, and basically with the turbos they need oil, and they need oil going into them and oil going out of them as well, called the oil return, and that oil that comes out runs back into the sump. So we basically need to put this sump on because we need that oil return line, and this sump down here doesn't have a hole in it for an oil return line, so that's why we need to get this on. So let's get it fitted.
Now, I previously removed this blue sump with the hole in it off our old 4E FTE engine, and after giving the mating surface a clean up with the Stanley blade, I could then apply some black gasket maker onto that mating surface and get this sump fitted. But there was a problem.
Why is that not going down? It's just not going down. Seriously debating just taking this off, wiping it all off and giving it another go. That's good. Well, that didn't go very well. Terribly, some would say. Also might have been a good idea to do a test fit. And this smells absolutely awful.
So after giving the mating surface of the engine and the sump a thorough clean, we soon discovered that the 4E FTE sump is actually a completely different shape to the 5E sump, which is why it couldn't fit. This just makes things even more complicated because later on we're going to have to do some welding and modification to this sump, but for now, the new multi-layered steel 1.4mm thick head gasket alongside brand new ARP head bolts have just arrived, so we can now install the head. And because we are going to be running even more power through this new engine setup, I wanted to make sure that absolutely every gasket was brand new and all of our important hardware, like the head bolts for example, was the best quality. Now, something I love about these ARP head bolts is that they come with detailed instructions on how to properly bolt down the head. It mentions important steps such as cleaning the head bolt holes properly with brake cleaner, lubricating the head bolts, and of course our torque sequence. So the torque sequence specified was to tighten up the bolts in 3 different steps. Firstly at 27 Newton meters, then at 54, and then finally at 81. So now the head has been properly installed, there is another really big job that we need to get on with, and it's actually to do with the oil filter. Now on the 5E, because it doesn't have a turbo sitting on the exhaust manifold, this is where the oil filter sits. But on the turbocharged 4E, the oil filter actually sits on this sort of relocation housing which has one big bolt through the middle with 3 studs holding it in. If you take the housing and the studs out, this is what it looks like. But spot the difference between the 4E and the 5E. As you can see, there are no threaded holes in the 5E for the 3 studs to go in. This means that I have to undertake quite possibly the most challenging mechanical job I have ever attempted. And that job is to make 3 bolt holes that are exactly the right width, depth, and location, and then on top of that I have to tap in a new thread into these holes with a tap and die set. And this is on the only block that we have left that isn't broken, when I have never done this before. It's safe to say I was very nervous doing this job. So I thought doing one hole at a time was probably the best way of doing this, so after drilling the first small pilot hole, I could then use the correct diameter drill bit with a sharpied mark on the end to tell me how deep to drill, to then make that first stud hole. And after finishing up with that, I could then get out the ratchet with the tapping tool on it and create our new threads. I could then test fit the stud and then rinse and repeat that process 2 more times.
Can't lie, for someone who like 2 years ago couldn't even do an oil change, I'm pretty proud of that. I know it can never rest, so I always try my best, but there's some lessons hard for me to learn, like good boys don't play with bad girls. That is absolutely beautiful. So if you're wondering why we've not done this one, it's because the hole, I accidentally did it in like the wrong place. So like the stud didn't line up, so we're gonna have to run with 2, but I think 2 is still way better than none. And I think, oh, look how mint that is.
So now that's done, I could then go ahead and give the mating surface one final clean before installing our brand new gasket which I bought from Toyota, and then the oil filter housing could be fitted on. So the next small job I could quickly get on with was installing the correct oil pressure and knock sensors onto the engine block. I'd previously removed these sensors off this engine to fit them onto the 4E FTE, but here I am fitting them back onto the original engine block. And once that was done, I could then move on to the camshafts.
Next, we're going to move on to installing our camshafts. Now, I was originally going to install the 4E FTE camshafts, but I have done some research, and apparently these camshafts, the 5E FHE camshafts, are actually really desirable, and they're much better to put in the 4E head over the 4E cams. And the reason being is that these camshaft lobes are actually far more aggressive and they allow for more valve lift, meaning we can actually get more horsepower with these. So let's get them fitted.
So like the 4E FTE cams that we installed earlier, installing these cams from the 5E is the exact same process. But once that was done, we could then go and visit the best welders in the game to go and get our sump modified.
So both of our oil sumps are now here at the exhaust company, and basically all we are going to do is chop this oil return out and make a big hole in this one and then weld it in. Pretty simple, let's get on with it.
So after doing a bit of measuring up, Josh could then make a hole in the sump with the drill. And once that was done, it was just a case of cleaning up the surface and then welding on the oil return pipe to the sump.
So that is our sump with our oil return now welded on. A big thanks goes to the guys here at the exhaust company for getting that sorted out so quickly, but now we can go back to the unit and get this fitted.
So now we're back, we can work on getting our modified sump installed. But before doing so, we noticed something pleasantly surprising.
We have just made an amazing discovery. I think all the bad luck that we've had up until this point with this project is just the universe's way of pointing us towards using this engine over the 4 EFTEs that we've been buying, because we have found out that the rods in this engine are ridiculously thick. Take a look at how beefy they are. Now, I'm going to overlay some pans now of what the 5E FHE rods look like compared to the 4E FTE rods. It is night and day. These are ridiculously thick, and I reckon it could push like 300 horsepower on these rods. It reminds me of an early 2JZ engine, which, you know, it has ridiculously overbuilt rods for the amount of power that it was running. I think Toyota had the same mentality when making this. So after all of that bad luck, we might actually be in for an engine which is way more powerful than any engine that we could have imagined while using the 4E FTE.
So with the revelation that our 5E engine has the potential to be an absolute powerhouse, we could get on with installing the new sump. Now, when fitting one of these sumps, it's important to make sure that it's carefully lowered down onto the mating surface and that the bolts are tightened up in a cross pattern to the correct torque setting. So for our sump bolts, it was around 8 Newton meters.
No sign of water, but you quench my thirst.
So now that our modified sump has been fitted, we can now get on with the reassembly of this engine, and I started off by fitting the exhaust manifold and the turbo. When doing this, I had to make sure to connect up the turbo's oil feed and oil return lines.
Oh, that is such a nice oil return, isn't it? Josh, at the exhaust company, I don't like admitting this, but you are quite good sometimes. Beautiful.
So that is now the exhaust side of our engine completely done, and now I can move on to the inlet side and fit the inlet manifold. Once that was bolted down, it was then time to fit the injectors. And after I had fitted those, it was on with the thermostat housing. So once the thermostat housing was bolted down, all that was left to do was to connect up all of the coolant lines.
They're both on. Our engine is looking more and more complete the further we get on with it. I am so proud of this. We still have a few jobs left to do. We've got to get our cam cover on. We also have to do our gearbox and clutch, but obviously we're going to have to wait until this is off the engine stand to do that. But there is one big job we still have to do, and that is the timing again for the second time in this video. So let's get started.
So doing the timing on the 5e was actually a lot easier and quicker than when I tried it on the 4e, and that's because I learned from that first time how exactly these engines time up. Now there is one slight difference between the 4e and the 5e, and it's actually to do with the belt that you've got to use. Because the 5e is 1.5 litres rather than 1.3, the block is actually a tiny bit longer than the 4es, meaning you have to use a slightly longer belt to time it up. So after finishing up with the timing, I could quickly reassemble all of the belt covers and the crank pulley before moving on to the final job that I could do on the engine stand, which was fitting the cam cover. Now, alongside replacing all 4 of the sort of spark plug O-rings that sit in the cam cover, I also made sure to use a brand new rubber gasket for the main outside seal, and with this I could apply a little bit of RTV sealant on that rubber gasket just to double make sure that when we do fit this, it doesn't have any oil leaks. But once that was done, I could then get the cam cover installed.
So that is all of the jobs that we can do now with this engine still on the stand. So we can now go ahead and get this on a pallet. Now we need to fit our clutch and our pressure plate. Now the reason why this isn't a brand new one is because we have a really cool, potentially maybe stage 3 clutch coming later on with a really cool gearbox with maybe an LSD, and it just can't come for this video. So we are going to have to get this in and get this in the car for the sake of this video and getting the car started, but just rest assured later on some cool stuff will be coming.
So to get our old clutch installed, I could use the clutch alignment tool and then I could bolt it up and torque it to spec. And then it was on with the gearbox. And now that's on, there is only one more job to do, and that's to install all of our ancillaries. So that's our alternator, our power steering pump, our AC pump, and then both of the auxiliary belts.
So, ladies and gentlemen, here we have it. Our engine is fully built up. I'm going to call this the 5e FTE, the Frankenstein engine, because it has bits of 3 engines on it. But now, all we need to do, in theory, is get this engine mounted in the engine bay, connect everything up to it, and just cross our fingers and hope this thing starts.
So this is where we find out whether all of the hard work has been worth it. Is it possible for someone like me with absolutely no mechanical qualifications to completely tear down an engine, rebuild it, and have it actually work in the end? I suppose we will find out soon enough. But firstly, after we've got the engine mounted up in the engine bay, we have the mammoth task of connecting absolutely everything up. That's all of our plugs on the wiring loom, our fuel lines, coolant pipes, and absolutely everything else. And to be honest, it can seem quite overwhelming having so many things to think about connecting up once the engine's in, but as I've said in previous videos, just mentally compartmentalizing and breaking everything down into lots of little jobs is the best way I've found of getting it done. So getting everything back together was all going well until I tried to fit the exhaust.
Okay, so we have ran into another tiny problem. It's not massive, but it is a bit annoying. As you can see, this exhaust is actually contacting the sump just there, and it's also dangerously close to our drive shaft. And the reason why this is now happening when it didn't happen with the 4e FTE is because, if you remember earlier in the video, I mentioned that the 5e block is actually a little bit longer than the 4e block, and this exhaust was obviously made when we had the 4e in the car. So because of that, the sump is sat 10 millimeters further down, and as is sort of the gearbox and everything, so it is now contacting a load of stuff where it didn't earlier when we had the 4E block in, if that makes sense. So it's a bit of a problem. We're going to have to run the first start with just a downpipe, so it's going to be nice and loud. But yeah, we can't use this exhaust, unfortunately.
So whilst a little bit annoying, it is not the end of the world. We can go and get another custom exhaust made in a future video. But for now, there are still a few more jobs we need to get on with before we can get this car started.
We are very nearly there now. The Sera is looking very back together. There are still a few things we need to fit, and one of those things I've been looking forward to install, and it is this. It is a little baby intercooler, and this, unlike traditional intercoolers that sit on the front, actually sits on the top, and we're going to install it now. So it literally just plonks on a bit of boost piping, and that goes in there like that. Right, so there we have it. Our top mount intercooler is on. I just think these look so cool. Doesn't that look amazing? I absolutely love top mount intercoolers. Now, to make this work and be functional, we are of course going to have to give the Sera a bonnet scoop. And also on top of that, I have also discovered that the bonnet just doesn't close with that on. So not only are we going to need a bonnet scoop, we're going to need to make some clearance there somehow. But that is a job for a future video. I think for the sake of today, we're just going to run with no bonnet. But there are still a few little bits left to do. So let's get on with that and then see if it will start. 3, 2, 1.
So the final thing to get on with was to actually extend a bit of wiring for the air temperature sensor. Now, a massive thank you goes to Evolution Autoworks for helping me out with pinning our new plug, but other than that, all I had to do was join the wires together using some heat shrink and wrap the wires up in some tape, and then it was finished.
Boom. That is professional work, I have to say. Pretty happy with that. Oh, satisfaction. Right, let's see if this thing starts. So, what I've done is I have unplugged our coil packs, our distributor, as you can see, and that is going to allow us to hopefully crank over the engine without any spark, meaning we won't fire up. But because we've completely emptied this engine of oil, I want to just turn it over to just get all the oil circulating, basically. So let's do that first, and then we can try start it. Oh, I don't like this bit. I really don't like this bit. This just gets me so nervous, mate, honestly. The amount of work we've put into this. Okay, all right. I've got to stop being a wuss. Okay, that is good news. It's cranking.
So after that confirmation that the engine did indeed turn over, it was then time to be brave, reconnect our distributor, and go for the first start.
Okay, right, Jav, do you want to give me a countdown?
Let's do it. Right, ready? In 3, 2, 1.
On the button? No way! Do you see how quickly that fired up?
Mate, that was so good!
Oh my god! Yes! Mate, that is idling beautifully! Mate, that is literally idling.
That sounds amazing.
Do you remember last time it sounded awful?
Horrible.
Mate, I am so happy. Oh, lots of smoke. We've got lots of smoke.
We do have lots of smoke.
We've got lots of smoke, but oh my lord, that thing idled so well.
That sounded nice. Thank God.
We've got to figure out where the smoke's coming from, but wow, for a first start, that was so good. I am actually so pleased, mate. Wait, we have put in a shift there. Ladies and gentlemen, If that doesn't prove that persistence is key, if that doesn't prove that hard work can overcome 3 catastrophic obstacles, we're a bit smoky, and we have been at this video for weeks now, but honestly, I'm feeling over the moon with that. Now, I know you are all going to want me to go and take this out for a drive, but there is one key thing stopping me from doing that, and it's because I don't want to ruin this engine. Basically, we're okay to start it and idle it, but because this is actually a 1.5 rather than a 1.3, and we have the 1.3 ECU in the car, it would be running a very lean air-fuel mixture if we took this out for a drive and actually got the engine under load, which would risk damaging all the insides like our valves and our pistons and all sorts of things. So I don't want to do that just yet. I want to wait until it's had a remap. So I hope you can all understand why I'm not taking it out for a drive in this video. But if you did go on to enjoy, make sure to smash that like button, click that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next one.